paper reports that two of the male prostitutes were given a late-night tour of the White House last year.
You want answers. I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Nick Bryant podcast. Today, my guest is Ari Ben-Menashe. He is my favorite former Israeli spy. How are you doing today, Ari?
I'm good. Thank you.
You look very sprite today. And I wanted to... there's a couple of things I'd like to talk to you about, actually, three basic areas. One of them is the October surprise. In case my listeners don't know what the October surprise is, the Reagan administration, Jimmy Carter was president. The Iranians took a number of hostages and they refused to release them. But the Reagan administration, or officials from the Reagan administration, Stan Pottinger, George Herbert Walker Bush, and William Casey, went behind the backs of the government and made a secret deal with the Iranians that they would sell them arms in exchange for the hostages. And the day that Reagan got elected, the hostages were released. And that really hurt Carter in the polls. Maybe Carter had a chance, but certainly while Iran had those hostages, he was not going to have a chance at all. And so where Ari comes into this is he was on the ground floor of this. It was called the October surprise. And up until recently, the October surprise didn't exist. But actually, the New York Times in a March article said that the October surprise did in fact exist. So if the New York Times says it, it's got to be true. Why don't you walk us through the early October surprise, Ari?
The Israelis were involved with the Iranians. The Iranians reached out to the Israelis to help them militarily against the Iraqis. So Saddam Hussein was about to attack Iran. This goes back to late 1979 after the hostages were taken, and early 1918. The Israelis understood that President Carter wouldn't want anybody to help the Iranians as long as the American hostages are held in Iran. So the Israelis did work out a deal with the Iranians to get the hostages out sometime in September 1980. But behind everybody's back, the Republicans, people with the Republican Party, went to the Iranians and tried to delay the release until Reagan becomes president. And at that point, they convinced the Prime Minister of Israel, Menachem Begin, to go along with them. So,
go ahead.
Begin, who did not like Carter, who felt that Carter betrayed Israel by giving away all of Sinai back to Sadat, Egyptian president at the time, decided to help the Republicans. So the Israelis went along with the Republicans, and the hostages were released only in January 1981, after President Reagan became president.
On the very day that he became president, they were released.
On the very day he became president.
It's amazing how that timing works. Were you? It was initially the talks, the negotiations started in Madrid and ended up in Paris. You were in the Madrid talks, I believe, really early on.
No, I was in Paris.
Oh, you were in Paris? Okay.
Okay, not in Madrid. Yes. And
go ahead.
And the Iranians were fine with it. They were fine with. They didn't like Carter either, and they thought the new Americans are going to help them and arm them, and so on and so forth. But as it turned out, after the hostages were released, the Israelis did help the Iranians against Saddam Hussein, but the Americans were helping Saddam Hussein. So to keep this war going for 8 years.
That turned out to be a pretty lucrative enterprise for the military-industrial complex. We were selling arms to both Iraq and Iran and watching them kill each other and selling them more arms. There's a gentleman named Stan Pottinger who comes up in the October Surprise. Could you tell us a little bit about Stan Pottinger, and did you have any interactions with him?
No, I didn't have interactions, but I know he was there, yes.
Because it's interesting. He's one of the attorneys for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and he has a long history of cover-ups, and he's got this clandestine CIA side. And as soon as I saw that Pottinger was representing victims of Epstein, I felt it was a CIA op cleaning up a CIA op. And you were in Paris, and George Herbert Walker Bush, the former CIA director, and William Casey, the future CIA director, were in Paris.
Correct.
And
they were meeting.
Go ahead.
They were meeting Ayatollah Karoubi to finish the deal. And the Iranians were stuck to the deal. They released the hostages the day President Reagan became president.
Were you privy to the negotiations between the Iranians and
I was part of the Israeli team. I was part of the Israeli team that was there.
And could you give us the crux of those negotiations? How did they go?
There wasn't even negotiations. There was an understanding, and it was fine.
And
it didn't take that long either.
So you got into some trouble because of that. The United States came after you for, I think, what was it?
They came after me for sale of arms to Iran.
Yes.
Which approved by the Americans and by the Israeli government. And it wasn't a personal deal. They tried to say that I was trying to sell arms privately to Iran. Anyway, I was acquitted in court. It's fine.
So you had to spend some time at the Metropolitan Complex.
And yeah, that's right.
How much time did you spend in that particular, I guess we could call it a prison? That's where Jeffrey Epstein ended up. A year?
About a year, a week short of a year.
So you've done the bidding of the Americans and you've done the bidding of the Iranians, and you find yourself in violation.
Sorry. I did the biddings of the Americans and the Israelis.
And you find yourself.
The Iranians were happy to receive the equipment, but it was the Israeli government that I was working for.
And then you find yourself guilty or charged with the Arms Export Control Act. So basically, you were betrayed by both the United States and Israel.
Sorry, we lost you.
Yeah. Are we better now? Can you see?
Yeah, now we're back.
Okay, so what I was saying is that you were charged with the Arms Export Control Act in the United States. You were looking at some time, and you were abandoned by both the Israelis and also the United States. They just left you hung out to dry. How did you feel about that?
I wasn't too happy, but I defended myself. I got acquitted by a jury of 12.
And that jury basically found that you were working for the Israelis.
That's right.
Like you said. Now, this is kind of interesting. The House was going to get to the bottom of the October surprise. And there was a task force. And you were called to testify before that task force about the October surprise. And they had a number of people that testified. And this is what they had to say about you. The task force found the testimony of Ben-Menashe to be wholly lacking of any credibility. In addition, the task force found that other evidence said to support the Madrid meetings was either of limited probative value or inconsistent with credible evidence, which indicated that the meetings had not occurred. So the House is saying that you're a liar, the House of Representatives task force on the October surprise, which is covering up the October surprise. But it's kind of interesting. They didn't indict you on perjury or lying to Congress. They just kind of let you drift off into the sunset.
Thank God.
When you were testifying, did you think it would be a cover-up job, or did you think that the House was actually going to look into this?
I didn't know. I was just telling the truth, what I knew about it. And I said, whatever happens, happens. But just say it the way it was.
There was so much evidence about the October surprise. And at this point, William Casey was the director of the CIA, including the Iranian president, Abdullah Bani Sadr, writing a letter to the American Congress saying, delineating the machinations of the October surprise. So there was all this evidence. Were you surprised when it all got covered up?
I just was wondering what's going to happen next.
What's going to happen to you, or what's going to happen with the story, or both?
With both.
Yeah.
To me and the story. Yes.
So were you threatened when you testified before the House? Did they say you better change your story?
No, they didn't say that, but they did threaten me with perjury charges and so on and so forth.
Those federal perjury charges, they carry kind of a long sentence. So were you at all nervous when you were testifying? That
I just said what I had to say. I said what I knew and hoped for the best.
And now the New York Times this year in March said that the October surprise is in fact a reality. So you've been vindicated by a United States court. You've been vindicated by the New York Times. When that New York Times article came out and said that the October surprise was a reality, what was your thinking on that? Were you happy that you'd finally been vindicated, or?
It was okay.
Yeah.
Somebody's telling the truth. Finally, somebody is telling the truth. Okay.
So you didn't pop a cork of champagne or anything like that?
Not really. Okay.
But what was interesting about that New York Times article is they said it was a reality, but they didn't name Stan Pottinger, they didn't name George Herbert Walker Bush, they didn't name William Casey. And actually, they didn't really name the real prime movers of the October surprise. Do you think that Reagan knew about the October surprise?
Of course he did.
That's
He
what
was wondering how he got reelected.
and it's amazing that the lid has been kept on this for so long. I mean, because what Pottinger and Bush and Casey and Reagan did, I mean, that was treason, selling arms to an enemy state, and nothing ever happened to them.
Well, they were in charge.
Yeah.
They were in charge.
That does make a difference. When I think back of on William Casey, I wrote a book with Henry Vincent called Confessions of a DC Madam, The Politics of Sex, Lies, and Blackmail. And according to Henry Vincent, William Casey had some strange rituals that he liked. He would get male prostitutes that would anoint him in oil, and he had erectile dysfunction. So according to Henry, and I've got no reason to really doubt him, our CI director was a little off at that point. I'm not asking your opinion about whether you think he was, but according to Henry Vincent, he had some strange sexual mores. Let's talk about Israel and Hamas.
Okay.
So there was an article in the New York Times on December 1st that said the Israelis had known about the Hamas plans for the attack for about a year. And a couple of days ago, there was an Israeli paper that quoted someone that was close to Netanyahu. And actually, this is a pro-Netanyahu newspaper that said that his plans were to thin the Palestinian population in the Gaza Strip to a minimum. So what do you think is going on there? What are your thoughts about that?
I believe they probably knew that the Palestinians or Hamas in Gaza is preparing for some sort of attack against Israel. But they didn't know that it's going to be so bad. They thought if there's an attack, they'll just take care of it within a short time. But they'll also use it as an excuse to attack Gaza. Okay. And so they did use it as an excuse to attack Gaza, but they didn't expect it to be as bad as it was. Yes. So Netanyahu, to save himself, has to show some sort of win to the Israeli people. I don't know what that win is going to look like, if there's going to be such a win.
The Israeli government betrayed you. What are your feelings about Israel?
The government may have betrayed me, but Israel, I spent time there, and I consider it as another country. I don't have any special feelings for it.
So, with the Palestinian conflict, the Israelis have been very aggressive about the settlements.
Yes.
And encroaching upon Palestinian territory. Do you think that this is going to be basically an extension of that aggressiveness? ultimately that the Israelis are just going to gain more land? It's going to be a land grab?
That's what they want, to grab the land. I really want to say something about this. Gaza used to belong to Egypt. When Sadat signed the agreements with Begin,
The Israeli
he said,
president, yeah, or the Egyptian president, dictator.
Yeah, he wanted every single inch of land back, except he said you can keep Gaza. The Arabs didn't want Gaza either. The Jordanians signed a peace treaty with Israel, but they said you can keep the West Bank, okay, to the Israelis. Okay. Basically, nobody wants to deal with this problem. The Israelis have to have a new leadership that would be willing to work out some sort of modus vivendi with the Palestinians. You want to call it a two-state solution, you want to call it some sort of give them autonomy, to let them live in peace, but you do need some sort of solution between the two countries. You can't just slaughter them. It's not going to work out.
I think the last Israeli prime minister who wanted to work that out was Yitzhak Rabin, and it didn't work out very well for him.
Yeah, it didn't work out very well for me too, because I started the Oslo process. This was before I got arrested. Okay. And Yitzhak Rabin was shot dead.
Yes.
Okay. And well, there's a group of radicals living there. Remember, we have religious nuts that believe that God gave them this land 3,000 years ago. And whoever's on this land that is not Jewish should be thrown out or killed or whatever needs to be done to them. Now they added Gaza to the list also. So we have what we have, but there's no choice. Some sort of deal has to be worked out with the Palestinian leadership.
I did not know that you were a progenitor of the Oslo talks. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
We started the Oslo process actually in Sri Lanka with they just had a new PLO ambassador in Sri Lanka. This was in 1988 or 89. That's when this whole thing started. It was actually negotiations with the PLO ambassador in Sri Lanka. And then there was also me flying to Tunis, the Archbishop of Santiago, Chile. He was a member of the PLO. He was Palestinian origin, Christian Palestinian. He arranged a meeting for me with Yasser Arafat. These are the two things that really started the process. So some Israelis weren't very happy with this.
Well, you should have stayed in Sri Lanka. Much better climate than Oslo. And the Palestinians, they've had a tough time of it. It's kind of interesting. The Arab countries hold up the Palestinian cause, make Yasser Arafat a hero, but yet the Arab countries treat the Palestinians like second-rate citizens. kind of like how illegal Mexicans are treated in the United States. That's how the Palestinians are treated throughout the Arab countries.
The Arab countries don't really like the Palestinians.
But yet they hoist their flag up and
well, okay.
To justify their hatred of Israel. It's kind of an interesting conundrum.
Justify their attitude towards Israel. That's right. But you remember, I will remind everybody that Saddam said, take Gaza, it's all yours, to the Israelis. King Hussein at the time, King of Jordan, take the West Bank, it's all yours, to the Israelis.
So how can this be fixed? Can this be fixed, or what are your thoughts on it? You've seen it.
It's hard, but human beings have to fix things. They really have to get them fixed.
Well, sometimes human beings think the best way of fixing things is genocide. We've seen that repeatedly in history.
Well, I hope in this case it will not be genocide. It would be human beings sitting down, speaking to each other.
So what can be done here? What do you think? What type of peace can be brokered?
In my opinion, you have to have a state where everybody lives together in peace. Some sort of autonomy for the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, but they could live together with the Israelis and with representation in the Israeli government or parliament as well. It can work out.
That hatred has been seething for a very long time.
Correct.
Do you think that it can be overcome? And do you think that the Israelis would be willing to let
it could be overcome? A lot of Palestinians now speak Hebrew. A lot of Israelis speak Arabic. Judaism and Islam are almost mirror each other. We try to say we hate Muslims or we hate Jews. No, Judaism and Islam both came out of the desert, Middle East desert, and they also mirror each other. So,
well, the Muslims consider the Jews and the Christians. The Muslims consider the Jews and the Christians people of the book. I mean, because the Quran is basically retelling stories that were in the Old Testament, also in the New Testament.
Correct. But mainly the Jews and the Muslims. Islam and Judaism sort of mirror each other. So the rules of behavior are almost the same.
And do you think Israel would be willing to have Palestinian representatives in the parliament?
Some will, and most probably won't, but they're going to have to get used to it.
It's interesting that you're putting forth this plan. It's been talked about before. As I said, Yitzhak Rabin was the last Israeli prime minister who tried to implement something like that, and it didn't work out so well for him. Do you think like hawks like Netanyahu are willing to concede that type of power to the Palestinians?
It's up to the Americans to make sure that this happens.
And do you think that the present administration under Biden would be willing to do that?
No, but I hope there will be another administration that would be willing to do it. Yes.
Do you think Carter was?
Otherwise, you aren't going to have any peace in the Middle East.
Do you think Carter was really the last guy that tried to implement some kind of peace?
Yes, Carter was that. I think Clinton might have been wanted to, but he was too compromised, so he couldn't do it. Clinton was compromised by Mr. Epstein and the likes, so he just couldn't push through.
It's well, Bill Clinton was. I think that Bill Clinton was very compromised from his time in Arkansas. I think that he was doing
that's right. That's
all
right.
kinds of malfeasance in Arkansas.
And the Israelis made sure he completed the job. It's fine.
So, do you think? And this is where I have some problems when people say that Epstein was like an Israeli compromise operation. I don't buy that. I think that there's no way that the CIA would let the Israeli intelligence compromise American politicians on American soil without getting a cut of that intelligence. I just don't see that.
I'm sure they got a cut of it too. I'm sure they, because, but again, Epstein compromised not only American politicians, he compromised others around the world.
Yes.
For this, so it wasn't a one pony show. It was multiple.
I'd like to talk to you about Yemen, but before I do, I'd like to talk to you about strongmen like Hosni Mubarak. And he was with the United States all the way down the road, but then the United States turned on him. What do you think caused that? I'm talking about the Egyptian dictator or president.
You know, I understand what he just got too old. They needed somebody new. Egyptian people just couldn't stomach him anymore. They had to get rid of him.
Because the way that the United States turned on him, if I was a president of a country or a dictator or a strongman, and the United States was backing me and I saw what they did to Mubarak, I would be a little leery of the United States.
No, on this one, I won't think. They asked him to step down graciously, but he wouldn't. So the thing, he was just getting too old, and he destroyed the Egyptian economy. He wasn't even speaking straight.
And then there's Assad of Syria.
For him to go. It was time for him to go.
And then there's Assad of Syria, who we worked out I think we called it extraordinary rendition, where we could torture people. The United States could torture people in Syria, but we also turned on him too. So,
well,
what's that?
About Assad, we're talking about the father, right?
Yes.
Yeah. He was trying to be friendly with the United States, but he wasn't willing to do a deal with the Israelis, and this is what caused a rupture with the Syrians. At the time, when Sadat came to Jerusalem, he refused to participate in a peaceful move. So,
but yet he told the United States, "Yeah, you can torture anybody in Syria, and we'll help you out."
Yes, they did. They did. They tortured a number of people there. Yes, correct. That's correct. It was a destiny, a torture destination for for the Americans. They sent the Canadian citizen there too, by the way,
Yes.
to torture. If you know this.
I know that story, and he was pretty innocent from what I understand.
That's right.
But he had a very bad time in Syria, although he was innocent.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens when countries operate without laws. Innocent people end up in Syria. In Syria, and then from Syria they go to hell.
So he actually came back to Canada because the former Prime Minister of Canada, Mr. Chrétien, intervened and brought him back. There was a time when we had a real prime minister for once. This was Mr. Chrétien.
So with the Canadian Prime Minister, how do you feel about the current Canadian Prime Minister?
No comment.
No comment. Well, you live in Montreal, so I guess you have to be kind of taciturn about your negative feelings about Canada. Understandable. In Yemen, we've got a mess. We've got a major mess. And it started when there was an uprising against Abdul Salah, and he was the Yemen strongman, and he ultimately ceded to his power to his deputy. And that ultimately gave rise to the Houthis, which were backed by Iran, or which are backed by Iran. And then the autocratic government of Yemen, which was backed by Saudi Arabia, who the United States helped out quite a bit. And now there's unbelievable carnage there and famine. What are we going to be able to do with Yemen?
Okay, can I say something?
Sure.
Yemen, there was North Yemen and there was South Yemen until 1992 or 3. South Yemen was protected by the Soviet Union. Before that, it was a British colony. And it was Aden, the city of Aden, was pretty developed by the British. Then the Soviet Union came in, they protected them. The north, and there were basically Sunnis. The north was a mix of different Yemeni tribes, including the Houthis, who were not Shiites and not Sunnis. They're what's called Zaydis. So there were different religious groups and so on. The North took over the South after the Soviet Union collapsed, but it was never a happy marriage between the two sides. Okay, and recently, there was an uprising against the president in Sana'a, the capital, yes, and the Houthis wanted some sort of to take power, basically. And a war broke out between the Houthis and the Saudis. And because the Iranians weren't too happy with the Saudis, they started backing the Houthis. Yes?
Yeah.
And the Saudis weren't very successful. Now it's a three-way war. The South is trying to get independence.
Under Hadi?
No. Even though Hadi is now sitting in Aden because the Houthis took over the capital city, Sana'a.
Okay.
No. They want independence and to throw Hadi out. Hadi is being backed by the Saudis.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the Houthis want all of Yemen, and the Saudis and Hadi want all of Yemen, but the South wants back independence. Now, the South is backed by the UAE, and the Israelis had a finger there too in the South, trying to help them fight the Houthis, by the way. And this is probably why the Houthis are attacking Israel. They're sending drones to bomb Israel. There were a few ships taken, two ships taken. They claimed they were Israeli ships, and so on and so forth. But yeah, there's a three-way war or a four-way war going on right now, unknown to and the Americans aren't sure who they're backing right now, who to back right now.
Most Americans that I talk to about the problem in Yemen have no understanding of it whatsoever. Americans are kind of lacking in history a lot of the times.
Well, some lack in history, some don't. There are.
So what can be done there? What do you think can be done in Yemen? Do you think
In my opinion, to stabilize it, the north should be controlled by the Houthis, the south by a government, the old government people, the people that used to control South Yemen, and both sides should be brought, talked to. The Houthis are not necessarily pro-Iranian. They can be talked to.
Well, unfortunately, millions of children in Yemen lack access to safe water, sanitation, and hygiene services. And there's a lot of cholera, measles, diphtheria, and a number of other maladies that are affecting these children that are, it's pretty horrible.
Again, it's the U.S. duty to help. Sorry.
And do you see?
It's the only country that can help, really.
And do you see the Biden administration helping in Yemen?
Why not?
So, because the U.S. is more or less backed Saudi Arabia at this point. They don't seem to be willing to take the other side or willing to negotiate with the other side. I mean,
well, the problem is, who is the other side? There are the Houthis, and then there's the South, what they call the STC, South Transitional Council. The STC is very pro-American. They don't like but also, believe it or not, the president of the STC is the vice president sitting in Hadi's government.
Huh.
Yeah, so there is confusion there, but it can be worked out.
Well, I hope that it can.
And the Houthis have to be spoken to. And I think they can be spoken to, and there is an opening to speak to them. I even met the brother of the leader in Turkey, not by accident. It was arranged. The Houthi leader. They were willing to talk.
And the Houthis are willing to talk.
Yes,
because in a lot of the media, they're coming across as religious fanatics that are unwilling.
No. They're traditional Yemenis. They have their traditional traditions. They don't live in Western like the West, but it's not religious fanaticism. It's a way of life. You know, I'll never forget it. He said, when you come to my house in Yemen, I will run out and buy a, a spoon and fork and knife for you because we don't. We eat different with our hands in our part of the world because he didn't know how to use a knife and a fork. He actually said, but it's a different way of life. You can't, anyway, that's what he said.
Well, I guess a knife and a fork would take some getting used to if you've never seen one before.
And that's right. That's right.
I initially had problems with chopsticks, so I can identify.
I still have problems with chopsticks, so it's fine. All I'm trying to say is they can be spoken to. It's fine.
Well, Ari, I want to thank you again for coming on the Nick Bryant podcast.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
You're quite the international man of mystery and intrigue.
Thank you.
And I hope to see you next time you're in New York City.
I will stay in touch. Thank you.
Hey, have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.